Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, welcome. My name is Tanya Woo. First off, I want to thank all the students who are here and Leslie Lum, who's invited me here to speak today. I'm so thankful to be able to share space with everybody. Also, wanted to introduce myself a bit. My name is Tanya Woo. My family owns the Louisa Hotel in the Chinatown International District. And so I'm going to be talking a lot about the Seattle Chinatown International District because that's where most of my lived experiences have been. I've grew up in Beacon Hill. My family has had a business in the Chinatown International District, which I will call the CID, but I currently now live in Rainier Beach. And so today I'm going to be talking about anti-Asian bias and racism and all the experiences we've been through in the last couple of years, even longer in our history, and the current efforts right now that we're doing to combat anti-Asian hate and bias and everything that we see nowadays. So I'm going to go ahead and first, we're going to talk about definitions because I feel like we should all be on the same point. We all have different definitions for things. So when we talk about anti-Asian racism, this is like historic and ongoing discrimination, negative stereotyping. People who are from Asian heritage, which includes Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Asian American Pacific Islanders. And so a lot of times when we think about anti-Asian racism, we think about the violence that we see. But a lot of times this also includes little microaggressions that slowly wear away at our mental health, at our well-being. And those are the things that we see every single day that we may not even notice. And just being able to see these things helps combat the accumulation of its harm over time. And so these messaging may be, based on stereotypes, which are oversimplification images or ideas about a specific group, and biases, which are personal and unreasoned judgments. And so I also want to talk about equity and social justice. So when we talk about equity, you see in this picture here, everyone gets, the exact same thing. But when we talk about social justice and equity versus equality, you'll see here that, some marginalized communities may need a little more help. There has been more harm that has been done. And so they need more resources and more investments to be able to have the same access. And so I'll talk a lot about, the experience of being otherized. Many people may have experienced this, going to school, being in grade school and going to lunch and having food that may not be similar to what everyone else is eating. I remember going to school with rice and noodle soups, and people thought that it smelled really badly. Sometimes, we're seen as a threat when it comes to, or Asian Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians may seem as a threat when people are going after jobs, which is why the model minority myth is so destructive. Because not only does the model minority myth perpetuate the stereotype that most Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Asian Pacific Islanders are well off, when in fact the Chinatown International District, unfortunately, is one of the highest areas where poverty is an issue. I believe it's, the U District is number 1 in the city of Seattle, and the Chinatown International District is number 2. But because of all the students who live at the U District, we kind of consider the CID as being number 1. So a lot of people, we may experience not only model minority, but seen as a monolith, being seen as all of the same, without realizing the diversity that goes into many different communities like Asian Americans, the Black community. Everyone's different and there's different groups. And so a lot of things we may experience is being invisible, not having a seat at the table, especially with city and county decisions being made without consultation with community members or stakeholders. And that's why it's very important to be able to express your voice. We're seen as, as gendered exotification, exotic. I mean, I'm pretty sure many of us in our youth have experienced in the dating scene, people who are interested in certain groups based on perceived imagery and not based on humanization of people. And so I think we have to look really closely at our history, because I think there was a quote from, I heard somewhere, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but knowing our history is harnessing time itself and turning it into one of the most powerful weapons, because knowing where we came from can help us to know where we're going, to see the harm that has been caused will help repairing that and being able to include more equity and social justice. And so I'm going to start from the China Exclusion Act in 1882, which did not allow for Chinese immigrants to be able to come into the US. In 1885, there was a lot of, I guess, expulsion in many communities, started in Wyoming, but was also felt in Tacoma, where they had forced all of the Chinese residents there into Seattle, actually. And from Seattle, they were forced onto boats to be sent to San Francisco. And the Chinese community never came back to Tacoma, but after the Great Seattle Fire, Chinese were able to come back and help rebuild the city of Seattle. And so first Chinatown was actually at the waterfront on 2nd and Washington, which is where my family immigrated in 1887. We had a laundromat in first Chinatown on Commercial and Main, where we just kind of was in that first Chinatown. And then slowly, as that land became valuable, Chinatown was moved to 2nd Street. And my family was forced to open another laundromat in Broadway at East Howell Street. So we were not part of 2nd Chinatown, but from building that generational wealth and from working, you're able to come back to eventually to 3rd Chinatown, where Chinatown is today. My family opened a restaurant and was able to buy property within Chinatown, current Chinatown today. And inside this building, we discovered Chinatown had an amazing diversity past. We found jazz murals within the basement of the Louise Hotel. They're from the 1930s. And these are significant because it showed that Black music was being played in a Chinese neighborhood enjoyed by whites and Asians and Blacks and everybody. This is pre-civil rights era. So this was really important, showing that diversity, communities coming together to celebrate music. And then unfortunately, 1934, this act was passed where Filipino migration was only allowed 50 people per year. In 1942, we have the executive order of the incarceration of Japanese Americans. And Bellevue has, unfortunately, a history where there have been discrimination of Japanese farmers. Bellevue used to be full of strawberry fields that unfortunately have been redeveloped into what we see today in downtown Bellevue. And so there has been a lot of proclamations, segregation, redlining that did not allow for many Asians, for many Black people to be able to buy homes in Seattle. So that's why you see there's a concentration of communities where in the Central District, you have the Black community, and then Chinatown International District, the Chinese, Little Japantown, Japanese community, and Little Saigon. And also in Beacon Hill, you see a high concentration of Asian Americans. And so in the late 1950s, 1960s, I'm sure we've all been on I-5. I-5 just ran right through the CID, kind of paving over many Asian businesses. The Filipino Union Hall used to be where I-5 is. And Wing Luke has this amazing exhibit on what used to be there before I-5 was paving over through our communities. And so I-5 is problematic because not only to divide communities, but it took away a lot of land. Mayor Harrell has a family business that used to be in the area. A lot of kids would walk through where I-5 used to be to go to Bailey Gas or to go to school. Not only that, but the pollution that I-5 brings to the community definitely affects people's health. Also, the South End, where Chinatown International District is a tree desert. So it's like a little heat island. So there's a lot of economic injustice that happens based on I-5 being there. And a lot of businesses were displaced. Also, the Kingdom construction in 1977 and 2000 took away a couple of businesses, properties displaced, and pushed back the CID to where it is today. But it has high traffic where game days is very hard to find parking, affects our businesses, and also affects residents who live there. In the 1980s, the Metro Transit Tunnel, which we really used and enjoy today, took out 3 blocks of the CID, and that used to be small businesses as well. And I heard that Sound Transit had promised that they would sell back that land to community members, but instead sold it to Vulcan, who turned it into a parking lot and to office buildings. Another great thing that happened in the 1990s was, we have Governor Gary Locke, who is now, I believe, interim president of Bellevue College. And so he really paved the way for a lot of people and inspired a lot of activists and community leaders. And then, of course, we had a couple of things happen within the Chinatown International District that did not consult the community. I mean, the Jackson Street streetcar really disrupted and decimated a lot of businesses in Japantown in the Seattle CID. A lot of CenturyLink, Lumenfield construction. We had a fight against Lane Street and the streetcar. And currently we have Sound Transit ST3 proposed a route that would have gone through 5th Street, which would be right from the gate, and possessing some of that property along the gates that now are small businesses and hotels. And so there was a lot of pushback from the community, which is really amazing. Again, 2017, we have the Navigation Center, which kind of, we believe, caused a lot of the 12th and Jackson hotspot emphasis, where you see there's a black market, there's a lot of drugs being dealt with, there's anywhere from 40 to 50 people in that corner at all times engaged in criminal activity. In 2020, we had the Salvation Army shelter being placed in, and all of these events happened without much consultation from the community, which is inherently racist because we were not, these high impact projects kind of did not do the outreach and engagement with community members. So we did not have any input, we did not have a seat at the table. And that continues on today. So I really wanted to talk about COVID as well and how that kind of played into our history. So of course, we all know 2019, COVID first surfaced. In March, everything kind of just started shutting down. Everyone hunkered down to their homes, and a lot of incidents of violence surfaced throughout the US against Asian American communities. Not only that, but a lot of businesses were shut down, not because of the virus, because businesses were afraid they would lose, no one was frequenting them. Trump calling COVID the China virus, the Kung Flu, was not helpful. And around that time, 2010-20 was when Bellevue College had a little bit of an issue with the Japanese "Never Again Is Now" mural, and having to deal with that right before COVID had happened. But one of the things that we saw during COVID in the Seattle Chinatown International District was that different community groups kind of surfaced, and advocacy became very important. ACRS, SCIPTA, Interim started groups where they would deliver food to the seniors. We have about 1,000+ seniors in the CID, and I believe 1,000 seniors here on the east side, where restaurant groups who were surfacing on Facebook, which really highlighted all the amazing food that allowed for people to go into restaurants. There was a small business relief fund that SCIPTA and many other organizations had started to help supplement businesses on their loss of funds. So while CID was kind of like a ghost town, there were a lot of community groups that came forward to help. Another big thing that was happening during this time, I'm sure we all remember, the BLM Black Lives Matter protest, May 25th, 2020, George Floyd's death, and protests started surfacing in Seattle. Unfortunately, there was this unfortunate incident with Jade Garden where they were constantly looted and vandalized due to misunderstanding on the internet, where trolls were spreading fake messages about the owner. And so that was a huge blow to the community, because not only was Jade Garden affected, but all the people and all the residents, all the other businesses in the area also experienced that hate and was fearful. So on June 1st, 2020, there was a protest in downtown, and we know these protesters were not associated with the BLM marches. They're just kind of bad actors who kind of followed these marches. And so the police had pushed back this group through the Chinatown International District. They went through the community, looted and broke windows. And the next day, City of Seattle donated a whole bunch of boards, which went up around the community, and people were painting murals. That was also the weekend. There was a curfew. And that's when the group that I've been volunteering with, the CID Community Watch, was started. Before, how we started was kind of interesting. There was like 5 or 6 of us who were doing community patrols on our own, and we would be in our cars driving around and walking around. We'd see each other. But gentleman Matthew Tolles put a call out on Facebook and kind of just gathered all of us together. We finally got to meet each other, and we're working together. We patrol the CID every single day for about 2 years, starting in 2020. We mostly just escalated fights. The Proud Boys had visited Chinatown. We were really fearful, but we were patrolling the streets, letting people know that, you know, we're listening on the scanners, we're watching where their location is, and they did come through Chinatown, but luckily nothing happened. So we were working to help, you know, the community feel safe. We believe strength in numbers, that numbers are a deterrent. We just walked around and greeted everybody. So I believe we must have to talk about, you know, our relationship with the Black community, because really the marginalization the Black community has experienced is much more than we can ever imagine. Donnie Chin, one of our Seattle CID community protectors, based his organization around the Black Panther movement. And so he was the original Chinatown protector, and unfortunately he was lost. And I believe he just celebrated his, well, not celebrated, we mourned his 8th anniversary of his death. And so it's really important that Asian American studies and that our narrative and telling our stories and claiming our space is so powerful. I know the Black and Asian community has a little bit of a complicated history because, as you know, the jazz clubs used to be in the Chinatown International District. And in the 1930s, there were jazz clubs throughout the area. Black and Tan was on 4th and Jackson, and it was like Mardi Gras there. I've heard people and musicians be walking up and down, celebrating, playing music. And so we have a little bit of a complicated relationship because we're not white. Asian Americans are not white. We're not Black, but we do enjoy, I guess, the privilege of being closer to white than closer to the Black community. And so I think during this time of BLM marches, a lot of community members were really assessing their I guess, their role within, you know, assimilating in anti-Black white supremacy community. And a lot of people chose to support BLM movements and stand in solidarity with our Black communities and really fight together, regardless of race, for reform in Seattle Police Department and more culturally competent resources. So on April 28th, 2021, we were seeing a lot of Asian American hate crimes in New York and San Francisco. We were seeing them on video, and they were popping up in the news. So the community was very fearful. The seniors did not come out after 4 p.m. And then this is when Noriko Nasu, who was a Seattle school teacher, was attacked. She was walking towards a restaurant, and her boyfriend was right next to her. The person who attacked her had to navigate around her boyfriend to hit her in the face. And she was injured, and she's still a great advocate for anti-Asian hate crimes. This was not considered a hate crime because of very stringent laws claiming that the attacker had said something right before the attack for it to be classified as a hate crime. And so we were seeing a lot of other hate crimes or violence attacks happening in our communities. Many reports of seniors being yelled at, go back to your country, being chased after, go back to China, even if they were not Chinese. And so a group of youths started these rallies and protests. And also around this time, Atlanta spa shootings had happened. And so the community really came together. Groups were formed. MOPOP, the Massage Parlor Outreach Project, started. And so really responding with love to the community. There were a lot of groups who were doing things like senior escorts. They were doing self-defense classes, trying to record community stories was one of them, where there is going to be an exhibit coming up the next month called Eyes of the Tiger. This happened in the Year of the Tiger, where photographers will come out and document what's happening in our community during this time. And so I think, true safety comes with an investment of resources, not reinforcing our criminal justice system, not punishing people, but really trying to draw people in and educating people about what's happening in our communities. With the CID Community Watch, we saw a lot of vandalism happened. And so what we would do is that we saw someone taking a business, we would tell them, hey, do you know that you're hurting a small business? They're having to pay for this. They have to replace this. And they don't comply. We usually ask them to leave nicely before resorting to other methods. But trying to, trying to really draw people in versus calling people out and showing solidarity to all communities. There was a lot of discussion regarding the word minority or BIPOC, because minority is used kind of as a way of minimizing and trying to change that as communities of color. And so I just wanted to put the statistic in there. And between 2020 and 2021, we saw a huge increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. So I believe that this statistic is a little misleading, because I believe these crimes have been happening all along. They just have not been reported, or they have been underreported. And so there was this huge movement to get everyone to report any microaggressions, any hate crimes. The Chinese Information Service Center is amazing at this. They're part of the King County Coalition of Hate and Bias, where different organizations are part of. But the CISC, what they do is that there are anonymous lines where people can call in. If a senior was walking to the grocery store and had gotten attacked, the CISC would try to connect the senior with resources for mental health. And if that person was fearful of leaving, going to the grocery store again, they would help them with meal delivery services, trying to get down to the root cause of that fear and try to help people reclaim their space and to basically not be fearful anymore. And so this is a whole list of groups that have kind of popped up in the last couple of years. MOPOP, Chumin Tofu, the egg rolls have a Sunday food services where they do a lot of outreach and engagement. We have the CID Block Watch. There were multiple Block Watch groups that have popped up during the pandemic, which is one of the great things about the pandemic. Well, not great things, but one of the better things was a lot of advocacy groups, a lot of mutual aid groups, a lot of groups focused on community popped up. And so we saw family associations, kung fu groups were doing patrol groups. We had Seniors in Action come together and like basically trying to do caravans, busing, driving people to get vaccinations, and was able to advocate for more vaccinations given to our seniors and first responders in the community. For the CID Community Watch, we had bike patrol, senior escorts, self-defense classes, and just kind of being out in the community at all times, trying to let people know what was going on. And so I also want to talk about two huge movements that happened during this time. We have in 2022, the Soto Shelter movement. So King County had opened a shelter in 2020 without telling the community. This is right across the street from Ajamaya. Basically, they had a COVID relief shelter for people who had COVID, was never used because everyone was so great at staying indoors. So they quietly turned it into a shelter. It housed about, I think, 269 people. They wanted to expand it to 450, include a tiny house village, as well as an RV park. And so King County had passed the lease of this shelter back in May of 2022. Did not tell the community. They said they did outreach to 12 people, but it was just 12 individuals who did not talk to anybody else. No one had no idea that this was happening. And then they didn't tell the community until September for a facility that would open in November. And so that was more problematic because the community did not have a seat at the table. We did not have input. There was a huge public safety issue that needed to be attended to, wanted addressed. Also, a shelter good neighbor agreement was supposed to be in place when the shelter had opened back in 2022. And so what we did was we first tried to do, we organized a community event. So I think what we did was, regardless of what your opinions are on the shelter, please come and learn more about the shelter, which is something King County should have done in the first place. So we organized this big event at Hingham Park, where what we did was we just, for the first half an hour, talked about what we knew about the shelter, and then asked the community questions, if they had any questions, and what the community wanted us to do. And the community wanted to have its voice heard. The seniors who have been indoors for far too long were not happy about this and really wanted to be heard. And so one of the things about being a person of color is that, we don't want to create waves. We don't want to cause any problems or any trouble. We don't want to raise our voice because we're afraid of, it's bad luck. And so a lot of people during this time didn't want to speak up or didn't want to say anything, but finding out that together, when we work together, we're very strong as a community, and uplifting these voices makes us really powerful. So what we did was that we organized protests, and because we felt like protests are the last resort for the people who are not being heard. Not only did we organize protests, we taught our community members who were not, English language is not the first language, how to engage with government. We organized groups and rallies to go to Seattle City Council, to go to King County Council, to engage in the public hearings, expressing our opinions. And so we encountered a lot of systemic racism. For one thing, we had 3 weeks before going to this King County Council meeting, we had asked for a translator. Day before, was told that a translator was not available. We had to bring our own. So overnight, we quickly found 2 translators who were able to translate the messages to the King County Council members and the Seattle City Council members. But the inherent problem is that all of the seniors, the 50 or 40 seniors and business owners who were there, could not understand what was happening. And so we asked if there would be time when we could translate the meetings to people who were there to listen. And we're being told, no, there's no time. So what we ended up doing was that during each break, we would pop up and just really quickly screen a brief summary of what was happening during the council meeting. And so trying to let city and county know that there needs to be more language access, there needs to be more outreach and engagement in different languages, and basically more partnerships and more interactions, especially dealing with what's happening in our communities. So during this time, I was talking about how, as a person of color, you speak up, you raise your voice. You're sometimes fearful of pushback, and sometimes fearful for our lives. This is some of the hateful comments I got on my Instagram feed. It's just this one person who just went in and called all kinds of derogatory remarks and threatened to come out to the community. And I knew this person was probably some kid in his basement, just wanted to sound tough online, but this really scared the community. People were doing outreach and they're telling me, I should not post any more rallies or events. The seniors were really concerned to show up because they're afraid that there was all these mass shootings, that something would happen. And so this got escalated to the Department of Justice, I think. And so it's unfortunate that we have to deal with things like this, but it's part of fighting and advocating for communities, unfortunately. But one thing I found that was community did come out to support me. People stood up for me, wanted to make sure I felt safe and that I was safe. And just the outpour of support was amazing. And so realizing that this is part of the whole fight, but you're not alone. Okay, so we have another big issue happening also in the Chinatown International District. We have sound transit. And I wanted to mention this really quickly, but this has really divided the community in a way, which I think kind of falls into the whole aspect of white supremacy, which is dividing our communities. And I think white supremacy is a huge issue in the Asian American community in terms of, trying to realize what's happening and educate our elders and our seniors and trying to build coalitions. But the fact that this sound transit decision, if you're not familiar with it, Sound Transit wanted to put a tunnel on 4th or 5th. They gave the community 2 options. 5th would have been detrimental. It would have taken away 3 blocks of the Chinatown International District. 4th is exactly detrimental as well, because all of that traffic and construction would be rerouted through the community. They would have nowhere else to go. But there's 2 groups, and I kind of summed it up. One group is wanting the light rail station on 4th. And they're saying that if you do not put it on 4th, you're depriving a huge community of transit. People will not have easy access to the CID. It would no longer be a 1 bus ride. You'd have to go to Westlake to transfer to get to the CID coming from anywhere. Another group wanted the station north and south because the argument was this construction and train station being there, and with all the traffic with game days, will cause gentrification and displacement of the community, therefore destroying the community. And so it's a very, both sides have pros and cons, and it's a very complicated process, but my opinion is that mitigation should also be discussed at the same time. How do we invest and put resources towards the community instead of taking things away from the community? And so a lot of things that we're doing, I think, in the community to resist racism, which includes systemic racism, government racism, subtle and overt, is realizing what's happening in our communities. Displacement and gentrification has been happening for years. I mean, we are living with the legacy of redlining and segregation of communities, Chinatown being pushed back 3 times. And also seeing now in Seattle, there's a lot of discussion on how do we stop disaster gentrification, which is the loss of our communities, the Black community, especially people moving away because they can't afford homes there. International developers coming in and buying property and reselling condos or apartments at luxury rates for $1 or $2 million. How do we keep people from the community in the community instead of being displaced or moved out to Renton or someplace further where the cost of living is a little bit more affordable? And so realizing what displacement gentrification is causing in our communities and being a voice for that, there are so many amazing groups coming together. They're looking at solutions such as, having a land trust where organization or a PDA could own the land, but allow to build on top of it and allow for home ownership for people who make maybe 20 to 80% AMI, who don't make the average income, which is about $120,000 a year in Seattle. It's a lot. But how do we allow for more home ownership for people of color is something that really needs to be looked at. Claiming our stories and our narrative. There's something happening in the Cambodian community. I don't know very much about it, but I just thought I'd just use this as an example. But that group is claiming that they want to be known as Khmer because Cambodian was the name that the white colonizers gave their group. And so trying to tell their stories of their lived experiences as Cambodian or Khmer, and that whole process is really interesting. Learning how to be a good ally. When you see something that doesn't seem right, to speak up. You want to report, you want to advocate, and just get out there. So there's a whole bunch of amazing organizations that are involved with this fight. Of course, King County Coalition Against Hate and Bias, CISC is part of that. There's a whole bunch of organizations there that could use a lot of volunteers and just getting the word out. There's this group called Make Us Visible Washington. They just launched a couple of months ago, but they're trying to promote Asian American studies in schools, which is going through the state legislature, trying to get this act passed where this is required along with Black studies. So how learning about our past and normalizing Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Asian Pacific Islander history and communities, I think will help a long ways in the school district. Representation matters. Getting out there, volunteering in your communities, and just, being able to, we have amazing Bellevue City Council person, Janice Zahn, and a lot of really cool Bellevue City council candidates who are also AA, PI, AA, and NH heritage running also there in the city of Seattle, and we need more. Also for school board, I really highly recommend if you're interested in running for something, please do so. There are a lot of resources out there for you to help with your campaigns. Because growing up, many of us, or I didn't really see a lot of people who looked like me in city or county governments. And so if you want to be the change, please go out and do it. Don't worry about, any repercussions, because the community will welcome and embrace you and really support you if you really want to go out there and do some good work and cause some good trouble. So some organizations I didn't put up here, Organization of Chinese Americans are really active politically. There's also JACL, Japanese American Citizens League, a whole host of organizations that are very involved in our communities, advocating for our representation and our, I guess, social justice and our rights. And so something I think I may have missed earlier was with the Soto shelter movement, we were very successful, and we did not follow the regular formula of advocacy. I think a lot of times when there is a government action that we're not happy about, we're very angry at the city or the county council. And so we don't want to work with them. We don't want to outreach them. We don't want to meet with them. We're like, you caused us harm, please correct it. And so one of the great things about that Soto shelter movement was that, we were not anti-shelter. We just wanted a seat at the table. We wanted a voice. And so everyone kind of came together. People had different specialties. We had someone who was doing messaging and outreaching to media. We had someone who was engaging public officials and doing meetings to try to garner support from the county and from the city. We also had people doing outreach to seniors and trying to educate people. And so it was a community collective for amplifying voices. Many of the leaders in that movement had their own personal opinions, but that wasn't the point. The point was uplifting and empowering the community. And that was why that particular movement was so successful. That's the only time King County has ever reversed a decision. Not everyone was exactly happy with that decision, because what we really wanted was equality, a seat at the table, social justice, being able to have our voices heard, and we're still working on that. There's a lot of things that we're trying to do to undo a lot of that systemic racism we see in the county and the city. And so that fight is still happening, and of course will be happening for years. It's a marathon, it's not a race. And so we depend on you, our young leaders, to continue that and to advocate for communities and to empower and uplift voices and basically be the change you want to see. And so with that, if you have any questions, I would love to take them. Go ahead.
So throughout your journey with advocacy and fighting for elevated voices of people, what would you say was your big step into it? What started this journey of yours?
It's a great question. So the question was, for those on Zoom, is what was the big step into advocacy? And so I want to mention that I feel like I have a lot of privilege. Having that coming from that small business mindset in the community and growing up in Beacon Hill, being so close to the CID. I did drill team, I did Girl Scouts, I did martial arts, Chinese school, and really being part of the community. I think when I saw all the inequities that was happening, especially when COVID happened and everyone was fearful, everyone inside, and feeling a sense of wanting to help. So started, my own little patrols around the community, because I knew the community, I knew what was going on. And if someone needed help, I knew where to go to help. And just realizing, if I didn't do it, someone else won't do it. And realizing that I have a voice and that people like want to know what is happening, want to know what's going on. And so I think one of people always ask, what is your legacy with the Community Watch? And I say legacy is, we have a Facebook group that has 700 people on it. And it continues on because whenever something is happening in the CID, like there's a fight in Henry Park, all of a sudden someone will post it, 2 minutes later, 3 people will come down running from their apartments to help, to stop the fight, to like get in the way. And it's all community based. And very rarely is the police ever involved. And so I think seeing also during the Soto shelter and seeing our public safety concerns rise, we have, we used to have 2 of the largest encampments in the city there. We also have both in Jackson, which we saw was happening. We started with one little vendor and we were saying, this guy does not have a vendor's permit, he needs to be removed. Or at least help him get that vendor's permit. And that just kind of grew into that black market that we're seeing there. And also we saw that fentanyl was on our streets 2 years before it became this big public health crisis. And so we don't have a plan for fentanyl. And why is that? And now we're seeing that trank, the zombie drug, is on our streets. It's coming from the East Coast and it's here now, but we knew about it months ago. Why didn't we have a plan for that? But basically, I think about the seniors really fighting basically for their lives. I mean, there'd be 50, 60 seniors who should be enjoying their retirement, being able to go to the park to play ping pong and just enjoying, how beautiful the weather is. But no, people are really fighting to be heard and for their communities. And I always goes on the back of my head, just seeing the seniors standing there and just, trying to be heard. And when seniors, stand up, and we have to respect them. We have to listen to them to make sure that they're okay. And that really drives me. Any other questions? So I have a question for you. You have an Asian American Pacific Islander group or club?
Well, yes, we do have, it's called a PISA, so it's Asian Pacific Islander Student Association. We consist of a variety of students that come from a diverse background. We are mostly online because a good number of them are actually working as well. They're working as full-time students and part-time workers. But we occasionally had group chats, hangouts, just to check in on them, make sure how's it going, what's bugging you, either as a student or as a personal life. So we do have one here on campus, but it's mostly online right now.
That makes sense. So what issues are really important right now?
For what I see with, so I think that the big age difference, we have those that are in their late 20s, heading to 30s. There's some that are running start students, so they're at the youngest 16 to 19 years old. So some of them say, I have to work on my taxes, my rent is too much, I can't deal with it while doing school, so I'm stressing out. And then the younger students are, I don't know what to do with my life. It's getting really hard for me. So they're juggling the life as a student and as somebody who has to, live on their own or have to work for themselves. So that's what I've been seeing. And some of them are also children of elderly parents. So sometimes they also stay back to grab groceries for them, drive them around. So they also have to think they're also caretakers for their family.
That's a lot of issues. It's amazing to find community, to be able to find space to heal, to talk, and to just motivate and empower everyone. But I could see how that is also, it's also a very rough time because there's so many responsibilities and they're just, I remember trying to figure out what I wanted to do during that time. And so it's always very interesting. I went to the May Day March on Monday and seeing a lot of young community members from all races there. Energy was amazing, and just standing in solidarity and just being present was so cool. And I'm so glad that organization is there to do exactly that. Are there a lot of advocacy efforts happening here? I know there was a huge one with the mural, but that was back in 2020. Has that mostly resolved itself?
Something has happened. There were resulting consequences from that event against what happened to the mural at the same time. But depending on who you ask, it may or may not be satisfactory. We also have a bunch of advocacy acts to make sure that people are accountable for what they need to be doing on this campus, expecting more from staff, making sure that students, as they come here, they have the resources there for them, they are well supported. So there are also student advocates that are trying to make sure that people are held accountable for what they should be doing on campus. And that's a campus-wide concern. So it's the efforts of students from all backgrounds and all educations and diversity.
I think we still have an issue with Asian American studies.
Oh. And that's trying to get that program started. They're trying to get that program ongoing funding.
To have it offered on a regular basis, because we actually have, we're the largest Asian serving institution in the state. We have over 4,000 API students, so we're huge for that. And Asian American Studies is only offered once a year.
Wow. My goodness. That's really, how is that coming along? Like, are you guys really reaching out to what are?
I think it's really hard to do advocacy when a lot of our students are remote.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's been some disengagement with the anxiety and stress that people are feeling, and then trying to get them to engage socially again, which is stressful. And this is the time in their life when they learn all that. So we're very concerned about all that, but we feel like our students probably need support there, but I think for our Asian students, because they had those issues pre-COVID, right? We should be doing more in terms of, and like Sunny is saying, these are the younger students want to know what to do with their lives, and part of it is the identity that they're kind of missing, right? Because they're missing the history and all the stuff that you talked about, right? It was amazing. I've never seen it kind of compiled in one place, and I really like it. I'm kind of sorry because unless you can visualize Chinatown International District, it's extremely important historically for Asian American history in this country, right? Because it's so much contains, right? A huge amount of Asian American history. So, and what happened to that community is so indicative of what happened to all the other Asian communities throughout the country. And just having that history just given to you right now, which we don't even hear about, right? That's local history. We don't even hear it with that kind of timeline and understanding everything that happened. And the fact that it's still happening. It's still the same things keep happening over and over and over again. It's like we're not learning the history because nobody knows the history. So I think it's a big issue. Asian American history, Asian American studies is a big issue for our students, because a lot of the younger ones do not know that history and don't know why it's important. Right? It's hugely important. So thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
For coming to tell us about it. you know, this is recorded, and this, I know it's a real sunny, warm day, and I know that a lot of people wanted to, they asked me if it was recorded, and they will be listening to the recording, so. Thank you very much for coming and giving history. Not only that, but you know, all the things that Tanya talked about. Can you imagine going out at night, every night, and patrolling the CID just to try to stop, you know, something from happening, and not having to rely on the police, and doing it from the community point of view, and that is an amazing thing. So that's an amazing commitment to community and people and everything else. Thank you for that too.
Oh, no, thank you. Like we have 700 members on our Facebook page, and we had, when we first started, about 20 people coming out every single night. We had multiple patrol groups. We had a bike patrol. And so people care, and we're just, as the seniors, we're looking for ways to engage in government. People are looking for ways to engage with community. And so I think if anyone's interested in any volunteer efforts, it's always available, regardless of what walk in life you are, what age or color you're going through. A lot of times when we walk around, we just talk about food. And also there's a lot of satisfaction in, we go into the encampments. And so we got to know our unhoused neighbors, make sure that everyone's treated equitably and there's compassion in what's happening in that community as well. And so making sure that everyone in the CID is being welcomed and they feel like they belong and that they're being heard. And so Chinatown, the CID has always been the heart of the Asian community. I know, like on the east side, there was a group also fighting a shelter, and like it was just so interesting how different everything, like what works here on the east side in terms of advocacy is a little bit different in the CID. But it's amazing how when we were fighting against the shelter, the east side group reached out and asked how they could help. So it's definitely communities coming together to help fight against, I believe, bad racist policies that highly impact all of us.
And I think there's a new generation of entrepreneurs too, because I've been meeting them. Younger people who are actually starting businesses and the CID, and you know, and that's really cool. That's really cool that you know, they consider that you know, a really good place to, you know, to start the businesses and stuff.
Great, lots of cool, interesting concepts, and yeah, I'd love to bring back. I feel like the CID is still recovering from the pandemic. The boards are still coming off, and we're seeing a lot of empty storefronts, and so it's cool to see new businesses open up, and those TikToks going out about these businesses, and everyone has amazing ideas on how to bring back people into the community. And so I'm really excited. And you know, right now we're working on a couple of public safety initiatives. We're working on 12th and Jackson, but we feel like we have great support from the city and the county, and hopefully being able to bring back all the businesses into a little Saigon area. And so it's a work in progress, but it's also opportunity. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.